Hey, welcome everyone who's signing on. We're a couple of minutes away from getting started, but leave a message in the chat. Let us know where you're from. We're so glad that you're with us today, and we'll be so happy to see where you are participating from around the world. Toby Breath from Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, Toby.
Hi, Toby.
Phil Goldfarb from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He's our head moderator of the JewishGen discussion group. We have people in Denver, Colorado, New Hampshire, London, Israel.
It's amazing.
We have some veterans on the webinar.
Thank you for your service.
So welcome to everyone who's signing in. We're just about 2 minutes away from getting started, but let us know where you're from. You could post something in the chat and we'll get started pretty soon. We have people from Jerusalem, Israel, retired Coast Guard. Thank you for your service. California.
Oh.
Yeah, 100-year-old World War II
Yeah.
veteran. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yay.
Former Air Force brat and daughter of 27-year-old. Is that a senior? What is SMSGT?
Staff
Master Sergeant.
Sergeant, yeah.
Well, we're glad you're with us.
Senior Master Sergeant, there we
Thank
go.
you.
I was
Yeah.
like, no, the S is wrong. That first S is wrong.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike Brown. We have people from
Appreciate
North
it.
Dakota, more people from Denver, Philadelphia, Mountain View, California. Glad you're with us. For everyone who's joining us, welcome. We are going to get started in a minute. You can let us know in the chat where you are from, where you're participating from. We're so glad that you're with us, and we'll start in about a minute. Jordan Auslander, right here in New York City. Glad to have you with us.
I see some fellow New Englanders on there.
Active duty Jewish Air Force Jewish chaplain, Edwards Air Force Base. Very cool.
Vietnam veteran from Marvin. Glad you're with us. Okay, welcome everyone who is with us today for today's JewishGen Talk. It's 2 o'clock, so we are going to get started. For those of you who are just logging in, you can let us know in the chat where you are from. My name is Avram Grohl, and I'm privileged to serve as Executive Director of JewishGen, which is the global home for Jewish genealogy. We are an affiliate of New York's Holocaust Museum in Lower Manhattan. We have a wonderful panel presentation today that will focus on researching Jews in the US military. And before we get started, just a couple of notes. Number one, the session is being recorded. We will post it on our YouTube channel, hopefully within the next couple of days. And when it's done, we will post a message on our discussion group to let you know that it's live. So if you are not on the JewishGen discussion group, please sign up. It's an amazing resource. It's an amazing opportunity to connect with thousands of people from around the world. You can talk about researching Jews in the US military, among many, many, many other topics. Of particular note has archives going back to 1998. So you can put in and see if anybody else has been researching or talked about something that you're looking for. So please sign up for the discussion group. And the second note is that there will be an opportunity for questions and answers towards the end of the program. As we go along, if you want to put something in the Q&A on the bottom of your screen, you're welcome to do so, and then we will try to pick them out at the end. Please try to keep the questions general in nature. We unfortunately will not be able to do personalized research. I'm going to pass this along to Ellen Coet, who will describe a little bit more in terms of how this program will proceed. Ellen Coet is the director of our U.S. Research Division, of JewishGen's U.S. Research Division. She's also the National Vice Chair of the Daughters of the American Revolution, the DAR Jewish Task Force. And she has been very instrumental in putting together this wonderful program today. So we are very, very glad that you were with us. I thank the panelists who are joining us. And without further ado, I pass it over to Ellen Coet.
Great, thank you, Abraham. I'd like to wish everyone an early happy Veterans Day. It was intentional that we selected this week to have this panel. We're going to have a series of 4 different presentations, beginning with Pam Elby, who is an archivist for the National Museum of American Jewish Military History. Then we'll segue into Operation Benjamin, where Rachel Silverman, a professional genealogist, will speak. And then we have 2 researchers from the Shapell Roster of Jews in the American Civil War. Alex Apito and Caitlin Winkler will share the screen and give a presentation. And then I'm going to circle back and demonstrate Revolutionary War resources on the DAR's website and introduce you to JewishGen's military resources. So it's a great lineup. There is a handout that if you pre-registered for this webinar would have been emailed to you, but I understand it's going to be put into the chat, so you can look for that here on the live webinar. If your friends or colleagues or relatives are interested, as Avram said, this is being recorded and will be on the JewishGen YouTube channel afterwards. So I also want to give a call out that I'm the daughter of a veteran. My father served in the Air Force, and my grandfather was part of the US Navy in World War II in the engineering division called the Seabees. So hello out there to any Seabees and Air Force veterans. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is a pre-recorded video by Pam Elby. The National Museum of American Jewish Military History is opening a new exhibit in Washington, D.C. this week, so she couldn't participate live. And the audio might be a little on the low side. We apologize in advance. Just crank up your local audio and you should be able to hear everything Pam has to say. So without further ado, this is Pam Elby.
Hello and welcome. My name is Pamela Elby. I am the Director of Collections, Archives, and Exhibitions at the National Museum of American Jewish Military History in Washington. Excuse my voice, I have a little bit of a cold, so I will try to enunciate so that you can hear me clearly. I have been with the museum for nearly 20 years now. I have a degree from the University of Wisconsin, go Badgers, and a master's in museum studies from George Washington University. Now, I think the best way to give you an idea about the museum's collections and how they may be helpful to you is to give you a little bit of history of both the museum itself and our allied organization, the Jewish War Veterans. So the Jewish War Veterans is the oldest active, continuously active veterans organization in the United States. It was formed in 1896 as the Hebrew Union Veterans Association. It was formed in New York City by a group of Union Civil War veterans to refute the idea that Mark Twain had put forth in a Harper's article that Jews were not patriotic and that they did not serve in the military. So as the U.S. was involved in more conflicts like Spanish-American War and then the First World War, the organization grew. They started out with just a handful of posts, mainly on the East Coast, to following World War II, there were hundreds of posts across the country from coast to coast. As I said, originally they were founded and headquartered in New York City, but in the mid-1950s, they made the move down to Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, at that point, it looks like they disposed of many of the institutional records, which is horrible, but nothing can be done about that. But when they moved, they decided that they needed some sort of legacy. Should the veterans organization itself die out, they wanted there to be a group that would continue to show that Jews have always served in the U.S. military. And so they created the National Shrine to the Jewish War Dead in 1954. In 1958, that organization received a congressional charter and became the National Museum of American Jewish Military History. Now, the early decades of the museum, it really wasn't a museum as we would think of it. They were not actively collecting. They did not present any exhibitions. They had, maybe something like someone's medal would be displayed, or there would be a painting or a photograph, but they were not a museum as we would think of it. In 1983, the museum purchased the building that we are currently housed in. And in 1984, both organizations moved from New Hampshire Avenue to our current location on R Street. And it was after this move that the museum really began collecting and presenting exhibitions. Our first accessions are from 1986, and the collection has continued to grow and grow since the mid-1980s. Most of our collection here at the museum has come via the members of the Jewish war veterans or their next of kin. So we unfortunately are not comprehensive. We don't have information on all Jews who have served in the U.S. military, but we do have a good collection of predominantly 20th century military records. Most of our collection is World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. While we do have some material that predates World War I, and we do have some more recent service, most of our collection is from the World War I to Vietnam eras, both during wartime and those who served during peacetime. We also have the institutional records of the Jewish war veterans, so the records of the national organization. So we have things like the records of the National Executive Director, so that would cover, big activities like the 1933 boycott against Nazi Germany, their assistance to Soviet Jewry during the late 70s, 1980s, and we do have the records of the minutes from the Hebrew Union Veterans Association, so those early years, the 1896 and shortly after that. So that fortunately was digitized thanks to the Shapell Manuscript Foundation a few years ago, and that is available on our website. So those founding members, a little bit of information on them and the activities of the Hebrew Union veterans, that is available on our website, and there is a link to that in the handout. Another great resource from the institutional records of JWV is their publication, The Jewish Veteran. We recently finished digitizing that just a couple of months ago. It's been published since the 1920s till today. It's still currently being published. So we digitized that and are in the process of figuring out the best way to present that on our website. It should be available hopefully after the new year, but it has all been scanned and is searchable. So if it's not available on our website and you would like that search, you can always send me an email and I can see if your veteran's name should pop up in it. So the Jewish Veteran has both stories of Jewish service in the American military and also information on the activities of the different posts and echelons across the country. So there's a great wealth of information on Jews in the American military in that resource. And getting back to the actual museum's collections versus the institutional records, what we have varies greatly from veteran to veteran. It could be something as basic as just a folder with an obituary or a news clipping or a copy of someone's discharge record or DD-214, or it could be more involved and include a collection of photographs, maybe some correspondence, a diary, or even things like unpublished or self-published memoirs. I've pulled a couple of things just to give you an idea of the variety and what our collections are. In the late 1990s, the museum did an exhibit on Jewish women in the American military, and as part of that, they did a questionnaire to the female members of JWV. And so we have this woman, Barbara Friedman, who completed that questionnaire, and it has both information on her military service and also some family background information, parents' names, where they were born, that sort of thing. And we've done different variations of these questionnaires over the years for people who maybe don't have materials that they want to donate. They can, but they would like to be included in our archives. They can fill out these questionnaires and submit them to the museum. So, you know, here's another one, more recent, from an Arthur Charles Friedman, who gives some information on his military service. We also have, you know, more involved collections. A relatively recent donation that we received. The donor's father saved all of his correspondence during World War II. So every letter that he wrote to his family members, they saved, and so this goes from 1942 up until the end of the war, and it's all of the correspondence, both while he was in the US and stationed abroad, detailing his daily activities and what's going on with the family. And so that's, you know, another great sort of resource that we have here. And you can search our collection on our website. There's a link to that search site on our handout. You could just pop in the name of the veteran in the search bar and see if we have anything on them. As I mentioned earlier, everything that is in our collection is not available online yet. So if you try online and don't have any luck, you can always send me an email and I can search our other non-online resources to see if maybe we have anything on your veteran. We do have a great collection of 20th century military records, a lot of things that maybe aren't available anywhere else due to the fire at the National Personnel Records Center. And we have a great collection of thousands of photographs also on our website. So just to recap, we have both institutional records of the national headquarters of Jewish war veterans, and that includes those minutes from the Hebrew Union Veterans Association, which are available on our website, and the publication of the Jewish war veterans, the Jewish Veteran magazine. And then we have the records of the museum, all the different various collections that have been donated to us over the years from either veterans or their family members. And those are partially available on our website to search. And again, you can always send me an email and I can see what we might have that isn't available online yet. So those are the 20th century military related resources that we have here available at the National Museum of American Jewish Military History. Thank you for your time and good luck in your searching.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rachel Silverman. I am a genealogist located in Manhattan, and I'm the senior genealogist for Operation Benjamin. And I'm going to talk about our work and spotlight a very important collection that is also located in Manhattan that many folks probably haven't seen. So here we go. All right. So Operation Benjamin is the name of our organization. Our mission is to search overseas World War II American military cemeteries and locate Jewish service members whose graves, for various reasons, were marked with Latin crosses, incorrectly representing their religion and their heritage. We work closely with the families of the fallen and our partners at the American Battle Monuments Commission, or the ABMC, which is a branch of our government that oversees the care of all American military cemeteries. So with the families, we help to craft and submit petitions to the ABMC. We work with the ABMC to expedite our grave marker change requests from the families and to see the change through all the way to the end with beautiful ceremony on location with the family. So our entire endeavor was started in 2014 when Rabbi Dr. Jacob J. Schachter visited Normandy American Cemetery. He looked out over all the thousands of graves of our American heroes and he saw a sea of mainly white marble crosses. And what he didn't see were the number of Stars of David, which should have been there. He had a hunch saying, there must be soldiers at Normandy that are buried under crosses. Why and who are they? So back stateside, he joined up with his friend and colleague and historian, Shalom Lamb, who's now our CEO. And they also recruited their friend and Shalom's family member, Steve Lamar, plus who's an amateur genealogist, plus a couple volunteers to investigate Rabbi Schachter's nagging suspicion. So they zeroed in on Private First Class Benjamin Garadetsky, who had a Jewish sounding name, but was emblazoned on a cross at Normandy. And it didn't take long to discover through easily accessible online records that Private Garadetsky not only was Jewish, but he was an immigrant from Zhytomyr in modern day Ukraine. So our new team, Shalom, Steve, and Rabbi Schachter collected a raft of historical documents on Private Garadetsky, and knowing that only family members can request headstone changes of the ABMC, they went to great lengths to finally make contact with Benjamin Garadetsky's siblings' descendants. So the family members enthusiastically joined the effort, and together they crafted a request to the ABMC. And Steve and Shalom had already built up some rapport with the ABMC's leadership. And as Garadetsky's headstone change was coming along and in the process of getting approved, I was pleased to join the effort and look for other burials in a similar situation. Benjamin Garadetsky's headstone was finally changed to a Star of David on June 20th, 2018. And a video of this beautiful ceremony is available on our website. Not long after we formally named our effort Operation Benjamin in honor of Private Garadetsky. And after I joined the team, we began to identify potentially mismarked graves at all 14 American World War II military cemeteries overseas. And it became very, very clear that this problem was widespread all over the world. And we all know that approximately 2.7% of American armed forces in World War II were Jewish. So using that as a metric of what should be, we painstakingly counted all the Stars of David at each American military cemetery and crunched some numbers. In all, we estimate that there are about 400 to 500 American Jewish World War II service members mistakenly buried under crosses at our military cemeteries overseas all over the world. To date, we have facilitated 9 headstone changes at Normandy, Ardennes, and Manila American cemeteries. We have 9 more changes approved, and those ceremonies have been delayed, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, and we have dozens more candidates in various phases of our processes. We are pleased to have cultivated a great working relationship along the way over the years with the ABMC, and their personnel are just as committed and passionate about the truth as we are. So we are devoted to preserving the memories of American Jewish servicemen and women who made the ultimate sacrifice while defending the cause of freedom, and we are very pleased that we have plans to expand the mission to World War I as well. So how do we do it? This is our process. Really quickly, we help to establish Jewish identity of a soldier in question that we have on our lists. We present an application with the support of the family to the ABMC, and the government will review, approve, and work with us to schedule a marker change. These submissions that we help cultivate with the family members often involve large groups of family members of the fallen, so we're very pleased to have all of these family members involved pretty often. And finally, the last phase is our graveside marker change ceremony. And we have several videos of the previous change ceremonies that we've already conducted available to view on our website. They're very moving and I highly recommend you watch them. They're absolutely beautiful. So our resources, very quick. We start with the American Battle Monuments Commission website, where we can see who's buried at a U.S. military cemetery as opposed to those who are repatriated home and buried by their families. On Ancestry, there are several derivative lists and databases which we can use to start tracing family members, begin to establish a soldier's Jewish identity, and perhaps start to understand why they might be buried under a cross. And of course, we need to see actual photos of a cross in order to ask that it be changed to a Star of David. So we get a lot of those photos from Find a Grave or Billion Graves online, but sometimes we do have to hire a photographer overseas to help us out and get a photograph of that grave. Next, we then have to acquire an individual deceased personnel file at the National Archives at the NPRC, the National Personnel Record Center in St. Louis. Those requests, unfortunately, right now are being stymied by the pandemic, and we're doing our best to get those requests processed. After that, and while we're waiting for those requests to be fulfilled, we often conduct in-depth research on newspaper resources. My favorite resource that we utilize is at the Center for Jewish History on West 16th Street here in Manhattan, which also houses the American Jewish Historical Society and the National Jewish Welfare Board's full records, including their Bureau of War Records collections. So I'll let you learn about the Jewish Welfare Board on the Center for Jewish History website, but the Jewish serviceman cards that are available on Ancestry are a derivative collection of the Bureau of War Records Series 4 individual records files and their subseries A of individual files. This one index card can open itself up to a massive file on an individual soldier. But unfortunately, not every service member has a Jewish serviceman card or even a file. These files were limited to service members that earned awards or suffered casualties or were part of a newsworthy event in the war. Again, they don't cover every individual Jewish soldier who served. But when we're lucky, an individual record file can often contain firsthand contemporaneous accounts of a soldier's Jewish identity, which is so integral in establishing their Jewish identity when they were living. In the case of Alan Franken, whose headstone was changed from a cross to a Star of David at Manila American Cemetery, his file was absolutely ideal. His file contained a testimony from his mother, as well as correspondence, which I'll get to later, and a newspaper clipping about his life, including a mention of being Jewish. So the JWB records are wonderful, and once a soldier was authenticated as Jewish inside the JWB, they would send these blue half sheets to the American military, which were then included in the soldier's personnel file, but were not considered official records. They're still not considered official records by the ABMC, but they are still very, very important in establishing a soldier's Jewish identity while he was alive. So Private Franken's file does show that he was listed as Protestant. His tag was not pressed onto his report of interment, which it could or may have been, but they didn't press it here. We do see that they had his tags, and which reflected that he was Protestant. Lots of Jewish soldiers did this, and ultimately buried him under a cross. Finally, officially, Private Franken was recorded as Protestant, and that's this column right here on the rosters of World War II dead. Ultimately, the personal record letters and contemporaneous records are the items that win out for Private Franken, and we're so pleased. Let me go back here. Here we go. A letter from his rabbi at college saying that he was one of his students, and a newspaper notice about his death, noting that he was a former member of a former resident of the Jewish Home for Children on Sherman Avenue in New Haven. So those records that were part of his JWB file finally do win out for Private Franken. And I'm so pleased to be able to present this collection so that everyone can see how valuable it is, but they do have to be seen in person at the Center for Jewish History, which also recently implemented a stronger, more robust digitization project, and you can contact them if you think that a research subject of yours might also have a JWB file. So you can find more information about Operation Benjamin and our efforts at operationbenjamin.org. And most importantly, if you know of a soldier who was Jewish, who was buried under a cross at an overseas American military cemetery, please reach out to us. You can email us at info@operationbenjamin.org, and through our website or straight by email, we'll be happy to hear from you. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Alexandra Apito, and I am joined today by my colleague, Caitlin Winkler. And we are researchers on the Shapell Roster of Jewish Service in the American Civil War, a research project sponsored by the Shapell Manuscript Foundation. We are creating a database of Jewish Civil War soldiers and sailors, which will be free to the public when we go live in 2022. Our goal is to identify and include every Jewish Civil War soldier and sailor, and to record, when available, their military service history, biographical information, and documentation of religion. Today, we're going to talk to you a little bit about the Shapell Manuscript Foundation and our project, and we're going to give you a quick how-to guide on accessing military records for Civil War soldiers before our site becomes available to you. In our research, we have realized that military records can be a gold mine, not just for service information, but also for genealogical and religious details that make these soldiers come to life off the page and give you a huge leg up on your own family research. If any of your family was in the United States between 1861 and 1865, there is a really good chance that one or more of your ancestors could be a Civil War veteran. Just a little bit about the Shapell Manuscript Foundation. We are a historical foundation based in Israel with offices in California, dedicated to collecting and exhibiting 19th and 20th century manuscripts and documents with a focus on unique themes in US history and the Holy Land. The foundation has many projects in development, one of which is the Shapell Roster. Pictured here are some of the pre-COVID exhibitions and publications that are currently available. And if you'd like to know more about the foundation, please visit our website and be sure to check out some of the many amazing historical manuscripts in our holdings. So working on the Shapell Roster, the majority of our military research is conducted through the US National Archives. As the repository for all of the US government's documents, it's the first place we want to go to for all of our US military research. The Civil War era files are housed at Archives 1 in downtown Washington, DC. There are two main types of Civil War files available through the archives: compiled military service records, or CMSRs as we call them, and Civil War pension files. All of the Confederate CMSRs held by the National Archives have already been digitized and are available online at fold3.com for those who aren't familiar, is Ancestry's military site. Compiled military service records are based on the original muster rolls and may also include what are called personal papers, which we will look at in just a minute. These records are available for both Union and Confederate soldiers. On the screen, we have an example of both an index and some of the carded files for Union soldiers. Some of the Union CMSRs have also been digitized and are available online. And once these files become available online, the National Archives will no longer let you request them in person. So you just want to make sure to see if your file is available online before you go and book a trip to Washington, DC. If your ancestors served from a state with CMSRs that have not yet been digitized, you will want to find your ancestors' index first. These indexes are all digitized and available on Fold3, and they're organized by state. This index will have the information you need to request a CMSR in person at the National Archives. We recommend bringing a copy to an archives technician to complete a pull request. Remember to check different spelling variations if you're having trouble tracking down an index. Here are some great examples of personal papers, wartime issued documents for a soldier. They can include, but are not limited to, enlistment contracts, hospital bed cards and other medical information, certificates of disability for discharge, pay vouchers, etc. There is nothing more exciting than seeing your relative's signature from 150 years ago and getting to gently hold an enlistment contract that they themselves signed. Next up, we have pension records. The National Archives holds pension records for Union soldiers only. This seems a little confusing. Remember, the Archives is a federal repository, and since the US government was not issuing pensions for those who fought against them during the Civil War, Confederate pensions will not be located in a federal repository. We'll speak briefly about locating Confederate pensions in just a minute. There are two main groups of index files for Union pensions. Group T288 is available on Ancestry.com, and group T289 is available on Fold 3. And on your screen, you have an image of both of these indexes. The T288 index, which is here on the right, they're only searchable by the soldier's name and the state in which a soldier applied for a pension from. Now, remember, this may or may not correspond with the regiment's state. These indexes should also include the name of a soldier's dependents if they also applied for pensions. On the left side of the screen, we have the T289 index from Fold 3. These are also organized by regiment and company and do not include dependents' names. So which index set is more useful for your purposes will depend on the information that you have available to you before you complete your search. If you think you found your ancestor in one index, we highly recommend that you also check the other one just to see what other information may be available to you. Like with CMSRs, pension indexes will have the information you need to request a file in person at the National Archives. And we recommend bringing a copy to an archives technician to complete a pull request. Some Union pensions are already digitized and available on fold3.com. For example, some of the earliest of the widows and dependents pension files are already online in their entirety. So if your ancestor was killed in action or died during the war, specifically kind of early during the war, it's a good idea to check the Civil War widows pension files on Fold 3 before booking your trip to DC, because again, they won't pull files that are already available online. These pension files are really genealogical treasure troves, and they may contain some of the following documents, which my colleague Caitlin is going to bring you through right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Caitlin. Let me show you some of the incredible documents we've found in Civil War pension files. First off, birth records for both the soldiers and their children. These are often transcriptions of municipal and synagogue records from over in Europe and in the States. Marriage certificates and records, again, both municipal and from the synagogue. Death certificates. Portraits. Now, finding a photograph in a pension is pretty rare, but we have found a good number of them. Bris records. We typically find these for soldiers' children submitted as a way to establish their birth and death dates to the US government for the purpose of establishing a pension rate for a soldier's widow and orphans. Ketubot. These are also a relatively rare find in a pension. More frequently, you will just see a translation of the ketubah, but we have come across quite a few of these as well. Burial records. These typically come from the undertakers or the rabbi that performed a soldier's funeral. Now, switching over to the South. If your ancestor was a Confederate soldier, there is a good chance you can locate a CMSR file for them on Fold 3. But if you do not find one, don't be discouraged. These files were compiled many decades after the war based on what records formerly Confederate states still had available and were willing to hand over to the federal government. Additional Confederate records can often be located at the state level in state archives and other local repositories. To find if your descendant received a Confederate pension, you will need to take into account what state they served from and what state they were living in after the war. Confederate pensions were issued by the individual states and could be applied for through the state a soldier served from or the state they were living in at the time of their application. So if your ancestor served in an Alabama regiment, but moved to New Orleans after the war, they could have received a Louisiana pension or an Alabama one. Some Confederate pensions are available online through Ancestry and Family Search, but for many, you will need to navigate through the state archives to locate them. So hopefully all of this information gives you a starting point to researching your family's Civil War service. But if this feels intimidating or overwhelming, don't worry, because when the Shapell roster goes live, it will contain the service histories and documentation for Jewish Civil War soldiers and sailors as a free to the public website. Within our database, each soldier will have their own page with documents like the ones we've shown you today, gathered from not just the National Archives, but a multitude of archival repositories. You will also be able to read about how these soldiers knew each other and interacted together within their Jewish and secular communities. To be entered into our database, a soldier must have served in the US or Confederate military between April 12, 1861 and May 9, 1865, the start and end dates of the Civil War, and must have documented evidence that the soldier was Jewish by genealogy, by self-identification, or by identification by his peers. 10 years ago, we started working with a list of Civil War soldiers from Simon Wolfe's The American Jew as Patriot, Soldier, and Citizen, formerly considered the source on Jewish Civil War soldiers, both proving and disproving his claims on soldiers from each state. Since then, the project has expanded exponentially in scope, identifying hundreds of new, previously unknown Jewish Civil War soldiers and sailors, both Union and Confederate, and scanning and adding a multitude of primary source documents to our database. We also publish articles and give presentations on many of the amazing men and stories we have uncovered through our work. If we already have your ancestor in our database, you will be able to access all of the information and documents we found and download them for free. If we don't have your ancestors, we hope you'll give us their names and we will review and scan their military records for you, again, for free. Either way, we want to talk to you and build the most complete histories for these soldiers. While our database does not go live until next year, you can visit our website now. The link is included in the presentation handout. There you can read some of the fascinating stories about some of the Jewish soldiers and sailors we've researched, watch some of our previous presentations on specific Civil War soldiers and topics, and view more amazing 19th century documents we've collected. We also encourage you to reach out to us now about your ancestors, whether you know they served in the Civil War or just think it's a possibility. We don't want to wait for our launch to talk to you. Contact us today. We'd love to share the files we've gathered on your ancestors with you now, or we'd love to go looking for your ancestors and retrieve these files if we haven't identified them yet. So please contact us via email so we can make sure that your family is honored for its patriotic service. Ellen, you're on mute, just FYI.
Okay. Sorry about that. The National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, or DAR, is a nonprofit and non-political women's service organization dedicated to promoting patriotism, preserving American history, and securing America's future through education for children. Over 190,000 members today provide millions of community service hours annually, supporting veterans and active military families, and also awards scholarships and financial aid. DAR defines a patriot in 4 ways during the period of the American Revolutionary War between April 19, 1775 and November 26, 1783, as signers of the Declaration of Independence, those who served in the military, those who provided civil service or patriotic service. Women under the DAR definition also can qualify as patriots and usually furnish supplies or paid a supply tax. Not all of the people eligible to be patriots under this definition are actually registered with DAR though. A direct female descendant must do this through submitting an application and supporting evidence about their direct lineage and their patriot ancestors' service and residence. As such, DAR has digitized a large collection of genealogical documentation, including for Jewish families. In recent years, a significant amount of genealogical material has been placed on the DAR website where it may be searched by the public. There are 2 ways to access this website. One is for the public, which you're viewing, and one is for members of the DAR. Presented as the Genealogical Research System, or GRS for short, it offers public access to free databases, including a Patriot Ancestor database, a member database, descendants database, the DAR Library Catalog, the DAR Genealogical Records Committee database, or GRC, the Revolutionary War Digital Library and Corresponding Index, and a couple of others. You can see across the top, the databases are arranged on separate tabs to make navigation easy. Under the Rev War tab, which is highlighted in red here, the resources focus on the Revolutionary War. The DAR has compiled a collection of primary sources and research guides. The collection consists of the Revolutionary War Digital Library, corresponding Patriot Records Project Index with images, and the Revolutionary War Pension Index. The Forgotten Patriots Research Guide, there are state source guides, and America's Women in the Revolutionary Era, a history through bibliography list. Some of these resources are online and some are only available at the DAR Library in Washington, DC. This is an image of the Ancestor database. You can see across the tabs on the top, Ancestor is highlighted in red. If you clicked on it, you would get this screen. Information is searchable in both this Ancestor as well as the descendant databases. These are derived from approved DAR member applications, which contain significant genealogical detail linking relationships. So it includes things such as birth dates, birthplaces, death dates, and some marriage detail. These applications and their supporting documents can be purchased. Requesting a copy of a record application costs $10, and supporting documentation or the evidence is $20 for all of it, not just one image. Payment is made with a credit card through the website, and links to the digitized images are made available for 1 week for download. I'd like to share my screen results for 3 examples of Jewish patriots. These names are historical and may be related to you, but certainly are familiar. Michael Gratz, Mordecai Sheftel, and Meyer Myers. So if you were to put in Michael Gratz into the ancestor search last name and first name fields on this screen, the results would look like this. You can see I highlighted in yellow Michael Gratz. The index listing will tell you his service that was proven was in Pennsylvania. It was patriotic service. It will give his birth date, place, his death date and place if evidence was provided for those events. And it will tell you what his service was. In his case, he was a signer of the non-importation resolutions. And so there will be evidence or a source provided to you where that is found. You can see that his spouse is Miriam Simons. And down below, there are 3 women who applied for membership and were accepted into the DAR with applications descending from Michael Gratz. And in an application, which I'm going to show a part of to you in a minute, you'll see that they have to prove every generation's relationship from themselves all the way back to the patriot. So that's a lot of dates and places and marriages. A little clue here. When you see there's more than one, there's an ID number, a member number essentially associated with each daughter. You can see the numbers below are 10766, 112855, and 227945. If you were to purchase using the green button on the right, a copy of their application showing all of the genealogy or the supporting documents if it was available, you would always want to pick the largest ID number because that would be the most recent applicant to DAR, meaning more generations would have been documented. Here we see the results screen from the index for Mordecai Shapell. His service was in Georgia. You may recognize his name as the highest ranking Jew in the military in the Revolutionary War. Here he's listed as Commissary General of Issues with the rank of Colonel. He was born and died in Savannah, Georgia, married to Frances Hart, and we have 2 daughter descendants that you could purchase the associated applications and supporting documentation. There is a little yellow S icon that indicates there is supporting documentation for these applications. And finally, I want to show you Meyer Myers, who you might recognize as the Jewish and Judaica silversmith from New York City. Here in the index, it lists his service as Connecticut, because as we know historically, the Jews of New York City evacuated and left for Connecticut or for Philadelphia during the war when the Loyalists took over the city. So his service is actually registered in Connecticut. It's patriotic. We see his birth and death dates and places, a lot of source material on his service. And I find the description very colorful. He suffered depredation, offered testimony against a loyalist, signed a petition requesting increased military protection of Norwalk, Connecticut. And just to show you a glimpse, below are 3 images of what, when you purchase the application and the supporting documents, the possible material that will be emailed to you as digitized images could contain. So on the left, on the bottom, we see 3 generations of, starting with Meyer Myers and his grandson and his granddaughter's relationships. When you see check marks, that's an internal genealogist, professional genealogist verify all of these applications. The check marks means that there's been evidence submitted, and you can see that there are materials on the right referencing a journal article from the American Jewish Historical Society on the Jews of Connecticut, as well as a court affidavit from Meyer Myers against the Tory Ralph Isaacs, dated October 16th, 1776. So just some fabulous, fun documentation. This is an image of the DAR library catalog. It's available online. The library is headquartered in Washington, D.C. And it works like most online catalogs. You can see when I put in Jewish records, 61 results, including burial registers, congregational records, newspaper entries, and more came up, including these 2 useful Revolutionary era examples. The Jewish presence in early British records, 1650 to 1850, and Jews in the News, British and American newspaper articles about Jews, 1665 to 1800. If you are a woman over age 18 interested in applying for DAR membership through a Jewish patriot, a Jewish task force has been established for the first time in DAR history to assist you in locating source material. There is a public Facebook group page if you're interested and want to connect. You can also contact me directly. There are plenty of other Revolutionary War resources, both for documenting people who served in the military or those who were Tories or Hessians. And yes, there were Jewish Hessians. We find this on Ancestry. Fold 3 has the holdings of the National Archives, and then of course, typical and traditional genealogy research using oral histories, personal papers, and artifacts, conducting a thorough literature search, including newspapers. And then of course, there's pension research, compiled military service records, military unit histories, and tax lists, and more. For the early American Jewish resources, congregational records date back to these oldest 5 congregations in the United States, in Newport, Rhode Island, New York City, Savannah, Georgia, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Charleston. If you are familiar with Rabbi Malcolm Stern's First American Jewish Families book, it is searchable on the American Jewish Archives website. The link is in your URL. Of course, JoBar has burial data for most of the earliest Jewish cemeteries in the United States. And on JewishGen's USA Research Division, there are all kinds of useful website links to other databases and a bibliography. This is what the JewishGen USA Research Division homepage looks like. If you look on the top across the drop-down tabs, there's Search USA Database, which brings you to this page. And on this page within JewishGen, if you scroll down, you can read what all the component databases are. They are growing exponentially. We are welcome and encouraging those of you doing projects to submit your data, but I'd like to point out two that have military value. One, Caitlin referred to earlier, there was a book by Simon Wolf that was the definitive guide to Jews in the US military titled The American Jew as Patriot, Soldier, and Citizen. At one point, Lynn Berkowitz indexed just the Civil War portion of that book. Although some of the book has been disproven, there's still a lot of Jewish names in there. And if anyone would like to step up and volunteer to finish indexing this book or cover the Revolutionary War period, we would love to have you help. My volunteer coordinator for the JewishGen USA Research Division is Eli Sabata, and you can reach us through the JewishGen USA Research Division website. Lastly, I saw some questions in the chat about the Spanish-American War. We are very happy to announce that this week we have launched our newest data set. This collection is titled Jewish Soldiers and Sailors in the Spanish-American War. It's based on an online digitized publication published under the title Preliminary List of Jewish Soldiers and Sailors who served in the Spanish-American War. And you can actually link to the image. So it's not just an index or a finding aid. You can link to the image and see what it says about your ancestor or relative. So that's what I have. I thank you. And I'm going to give the screen back to Avraham Grohl.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This was such a wonderful and informative presentation. Someone just posted in the chat that it's the first time realizing that 7 of her actual and in-law relatives served in World War II. So that's really wonderful. I just want to mention on a personal note that I'm pleased that we've been able to run this program today. My father served in Vietnam and my grandfather served in World War II in the Navy, and my uncle served in Korea. So we have a very strong connection and appreciation for veterans and everybody who has served and continues to serve today. A couple of notes people mentioned in the chat. There's a handout that has all of the information that has been discussed. So it has speaker information and contact information, and has all of the links to the websites and resources that have been mentioned. And you can find the handout on the emails that were sent out this morning, but I think we're also going to send out a follow-up email to everyone, and we'll include the link there as well. There was also a lot of questions about recording. We are recording. We're going to put it on our YouTube channel, and we'll send out a notice on the discussion group when that is ready. We have a few minutes, so I'll try to go through some questions. The question is, and I'll read them out, and please jump in, whomever you feel this is appropriate to answer. Is it possible that some of the Jews who were buried under crosses in military cemeteries overseas, is it because they may not have indicated on their dog tags that they were Jewish or Hebrew, out of fear of being captured?
Absolutely. This is a well-documented phenomenon where Jewish soldiers would have a blank dog tag with no religious marker, or with a P for Protestant, C for Catholic, just to protect themselves in the event of capture by the enemy. Abuse of Jewish POWs is also well documented. Some were targeted before they were even taken prisoner, shot before they were, after they were surrendered, or in one extreme instance, a whole group of Jewish POWs pulled out of a POW camp and sent to a labor camp where the majority of them died. So Jewish soldiers were not acting without cause in misidentifying themselves purposefully before they went overseas. And that's one of the major reasons why a lot of these young men were ultimately buried under crosses. Even if the Home Office here in the United States did ultimately determine that the soldier was Jewish, oftentimes the communication did not cross the ocean, and the soldier was continued to be buried under the indication of his dog tag. Or if in the absence of a dog tag, they also received a cross as a default marker. And the families were never shown photographs. The United States didn't furnish photographs of the final burial plots of these soldiers. They would just send a photo, a large photo of a pan of the cemetery, just to show the families where their loved ones ended up. But individual families did not see the final burials unless they could afford to go overseas themselves and see it.
Thank you. A few people have asked about chaplains. So this goes back to the beginning until today. Are there resources for people to research Jewish chaplains in the various service branches?
I know that there are chaplains lists with the JWB files at the Center for Jewish History. I am not overly familiar with those lists, but I know that the JWB did involve themselves with the Jewish chaplains in World War I and World War II. So it's worth looking at those resources.
The National Archives also holds chaplain files, at least on the Civil War, that we've looked at. They have like a specific record group dedicated to chaplains. And the Civil War is when they started accepting, there was a fight over whether or not there could be Jewish chaplains, and Jewish chaplains started being officially accepted into the service. So you can see those files at the National Archives, and we've scanned a bunch of them, and they'll be available in our database. If you go, we have all of the Jewish chaplains we've identified in the database, and they have their own individual records, and those records we scanned from the archives are included in their files.
That might also be an inquiry for Pamela Elby at the National Museum of American Jewish Military History. You could send her a quick email and ask that question.
There's a question about if a soldier was buried overseas and then moved and repatriated to the United States, if there was a headstone overseas or some sort of marker, would that still be there today, or would that have been removed?
I know of instances where a soldier was listed on the tablets of the missing, which are massive marble slabs at each cemetery, noting the names of those whose remains were not recovered. And then later on, when some unknown remains were identified, the names of those soldiers were left on the tablets of the missing. Now, the soldiers who were repatriated to the United States at the request of their families before final burial at any of our 14 overseas World War II cemeteries, they did not receive a formal marble headstone. Those were only produced after these final burials were taking place in the late 40s and early 50s. So the temporary markers were wood, stars or crosses, and those were discarded after the marble markers overseas were produced. So no, the wooden marker would not be transferred with the remains to the United States.
Okay, thank you. We are just over the 3 o'clock mark, so we're going to wrap up. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I'd like to thank Ellen for organizing this program and all the panelists for participating. I think this has been really wonderful. If you look in the chat, people have expressed a lot of appreciation. I would mention, as Ellen did, that at JewishGen, we are always looking for volunteers. If anybody would like to participate in the efforts of the U.S. Research Division, please visit the site, JewishGen.org/USA, and there's information on how to volunteer. I'd also mention volunteer for all of the organizations represented on this webinar. You could make a very meaningful impact. And so we would, everybody would welcome your help and involvement. I thank you all again, and I wish everybody a wonderful rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.